This is Take 5 with Bentley, Nevada. In the studio today with me is Steve Gaskell. Steve, you are principal for, is it cybersecurity, or help me with your title a little bit?
It's really product security.
Product security. So that sounds to me pretty broad. That would include the whole Bentley portfolio.
Yes, so really hardware, software, firmware, services.
For the last, I think, 9 or so episodes that we recorded, we had pleasure of visiting with James McDuffie. And as you were kind of explaining to me offline, James is a little more focused on the software side, and that's not just System 1, it's not just Orbit Studio, it's really broadly across the software, whereas your emphasis is a little bit more on the hardware side, but it also covers even things like services and maybe incident reports that you get from the field where there's a vulnerability concern, and to look into patches and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. If we get feedback from a customer or a third-party tester that's found a vulnerability in the product, it will be sent to me, and I'll triage that and look at, is it a real finding? Is it valid? And what can we do to remediate the problem?
Well, right now, it's almost like all eyes are on the Orbit 60 platform. It's such an important product launch for the business, and it really is, as you look at like those milestones in the history of Bentley, Nevada, there have been 5 major platforms. I think the 5000 series, the 7200 series, the 3300 series, the 3500 series, and now Orbit 60 kind of broke the mold with the naming convention there.
Yes, exactly.
For those that don't know, I believe Orbit 60, the 60 means 60 years.
Yes.
Bentley, Nevada basically incorporated on October 31st, 1961. I remember that date because it's Nevada Day and it's also Halloween. Well, Steve, let's pivot a bit here and talk about cybersecurity. A little bit maybe about IEC 62443 and explain for our listeners, what is that standard and why is it important?
Sure. Yeah. So even before we started design, we started looking at various cybersecurity standards, whether it was NIST or NERC, IEC, obviously, ISA 99, which is kind of the origins of 62443. And what we found was with 62443, it really encompassed all the contents of the other standards. So it really became this one standard specifically around industrial equipment. So it was really exactly what we needed to be looking at for the product. Since making that decision, we're just hearing more and more, customers referencing that standard. So we feel we've certainly picked the right one to base the requirements for Orbit 60 on.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's a challenge, especially if you're a manufacturer, to know which horse you're going to ride.
Yes.
You get on a horse, you ride a couple miles and realize, oops,
right,
it's the wrong one. But certainly, I think that's what the buzz you're hearing in industry right now. That's the right standard. That's the one people are gravitating towards. It sounds like it's pretty broad. It covers more than just, the instrument itself, for example. Does it cover things like the design process and...
Yeah, so it's really a suite of substandards. It's a complicated numbering scheme the IEC has come up with, but certainly from secure development lifecycle type processes, this is the 4-1 standard. The component design or the device design is the 4-2. So that's the one we used specifically for Orbit 60. But then it goes up in levels to system type security requirements in the 3-3 up to 4-2, which is almost the life cycle. Once you give it to the customer, how do they maintain it? How do they patch it?
Sure.
Do we leave all the passwords on the system, or do we clear them all off? There's a lot of good practices to keep the cyber hygiene of the product throughout its life cycle.
Well, and you make an interesting point. It's more than just the as delivered state of that product. It's got to stay cyber secure over 15, 20 years of use.
Yes. I mean, like anybody knows with Windows, you can secure it with a good password or you can leave it blank. So you can design all the security you want into a product, but you have to tell customers how to operate it securely and maintain it.
Yeah. And I like that term, good cybersecurity hygiene.
Yes.
I know that 5 minutes goes by exceedingly fast and we're out of time, but we're going to keep you in the studio, Steve, as long as you're willing to stay. And we're going to continue this conversation on 62443. Thanks. You've been listening to Take 5 with Bentley, Nevada, a Baker Hughes business.